Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the It's the Pictures podcast. This is episode 222. Our topic today is Steven Spielberg and extraterrestrials. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Evan Crean. How are you doing today, Evan?
I come in peace, Max.
Oh, hopefully you come with less tongue twisters for me.
I'll do my best. No promises.
As our fans of the video stream, you can see that we're joined by a guest this evening, and coming at you is newsletter writer, journalist Andrew Liptak. How are you doing today, Andrew?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am a newsletter writer. I'm and a historian. I write a newsletter called Transfer Orbit, which is all about science fiction writing, sometimes history, sometimes tech, a whole bunch of things in between. Max is a subscriber, and we chat pretty frequently about movie stuff on it. And I'm also the author of a book called Cosplay: A History, which is a history of cosplay. And I'm also a cosplayer and a member of the 501st Legion and general movie fan.
Awesome. For people who don't know what the 501st is, it's really cool, right? You have is it just like one stormtrooper outfit that you have, or you do like multiple different regatta like outfits?
I've got 5. It's like a potato chip. Once you start, you can't stop. So I started with an Imperial Stormtrooper from A New Hope. A couple of years later, I got a Attack of the Clones era Clone Trooper, the first iteration of that armor set. And I used those for a number of years. And then when the sequel trilogy came out, I ended up getting a First Order Trooper, the heavy variant. So it's basically the Stormtrooper with a vest and a backpack. And then Shore Trooper from Rogue One, and 212th Airborne Clone Trooper from Revenge of the Sith, which I basically just put on for the first time last year after having it for a number of years. I've got some dogs in the background. And that's one that you see like literally for 2 or 3 seconds in the back of Revenge of the Sith. They just look really cool, and I've always liked them. And that's that. And then on the Rebel side, I've got a Rebel pilot costume as well.
Very cool. Do you make those yourself, or do you have this like a supplier?
In some cases, you can buy stuff sort of pre-made. It's a little bit more common nowadays. The Rebel pilot, I had most of those. There's a supplier that I bought all the components from. I'm not very good at sewing. I'm better at gluing plastic together. The various stormtroopers, so the original stormtrooper, the clone trooper, I basically bought a kit, put those together. Same thing with the short trooper. You basically buy a kit full of plastic. That's all sort of shaped in the right shapes. You carve it out, make it sure it fits to you, glue the pieces together, and then when necessary, paint. So the short trooper is painted a beige tan color with some stripes and things on it. And then my First Order Trooper, I bought from another person who had already sort of mostly done all the work. I had to get it to fit me, and then repainted the whole thing and assembled it. The 212th Airborne Clone, it was actually pre-painted, but the kid I bought it from was like 10 years younger and a lot thinner, and I had to really work to make that one fit.
No, I thought that your book was really fascinating, Andrew, and why I haven't gone to an anime convention in a little bit. When my wife and I used to go, like either like the Anime Boston, or we even went to Otakon, we would dress up in cosplay, and I'd have a really good time with that. She's the sewer, so she would make she would be the one putting the outfits together, and very elaborate. Like I remember like one of the ones I really liked. We had like Valkyria Chronicles, which is a very famous like turn-based video game series turned anime.
Nice.
We really enjoyed doing that, and I know it's still mighty big if you go to Comic-Con or PAX East or any a lot of the conventions near up here. You can definitely see people in cosplay. I remember how funny it was being in Anime Boston, because it takes place at the Copley Mall, and like there's like really like uppity people like buying like really expensive things, and there's like cosplayers walking by all weekend.
It was very confusing for them, I'm sure.
The most interesting time I've had at a convention, I think it was probably Boston, what used to be Boston Comic-Con, and it was held at one of the hotels downtown, sort of on the waterfront. And while we were there was also some sort of girls gymnastics group, like a competition or something. So there's all these teenage like like elementary, middle school girls, dressed in like gymnastics clothing. And then in the same complex, there was like a boat show. So it was like these 3 different populations all mixed together. And it was just very strange because none of it was congruent.
Yeah, no overlap between audiences.
Not at all. No.
Well, yeah, we're definitely in the thick of it for the movie season now, and surprise of the summer, it seems like horror is the big sensation. Traditionally, horror, has been a great return on investment, Evan, right? Because you pay for a pretty small production, and then if you hit the jackpot, you do pretty well for yourself. We've already talked about the title Obsession, which continues to go strong. I think some daily box office results came in for yesterday, Evan. We're recording on a Tuesday, and Obsession won the Monday over like new releases like Scary Movie 6 or whatever. And it's going to become the highest grossing festival acquisition ever, probably, because I didn't know this, and it was picked up at TIFF because it was premiered during the Midnight Madness section at TIFF, and I think it was picked up for around like 15 million by Focus, and now it's like it's over 200 million. So
yeah, they're very happy they got that one.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to come out on VOD last Tuesday, and then they put the kibosh to that. They're like, oh, this movie's still doing really good in theaters. We're gonna push that VOD date.
Yeah, just let it ride, right?
Yeah. Backrooms did fine over the weekend, and Scary Movie 6 won its weekend, which we're gonna start off with the summer box office game. If I'm talking about box office numbers, Evan, and my lowly Mortal Kombat 2 is kind of sitting out there at 80 million. The movie just premiered on VOD as we speak today. So I think that its box office is it will struggle mightily to hit 100 million.
To pick up more, yeah. That's a shame. As we talked about, I really enjoyed Mortal Kombat 2, and I'm sad that more people aren't going to see it.
Whereas you have Devil Wears Prada 2 and The Mandalorian Grogu chugging along.
Yep. And you'd be surprised which one has made more money so far this year.
Yeah, right. If you said Meryl Streep would make more money than Mando and Grogu a year ago, you'd probably be laughing.
Yeah, you were like, okay, Meryl Streep, Stanley Tucci, and Anne Hathaway is outperforming Pedro Pascal and Baby Yoda.
Right. And this weekend you have the third of your movies coming out, Disclosure Day. I think a lot of your movies are like by the time we get into July,
most of mine will be out, I think.
Yeah, you'll have a sizable lead on me.
But you have so many heavy hitters, though. You've got the new Nolan, you've got Disney's Moana and Toy Story 5, and Spider-Man Brand New Day. I feel like those are just going to crush it.
Yeah, but that's the hope. Speaking about the Odyssey, tickets went on sale for select 70 millimeter screenings last Thursday. I picked up 2 tickets for the missus and I, Evan, to go see it at the Rhode Island IMAX. I was like, is this something you want to see? And like, she has not like been jump up and down about Christopher Nolan movies for sure. Like if I mention like, oh, you want to watch Oppenheimer? It won like 10 Academy Awards and it's really good. She'll be like, no way. She's like, that is the most boring thing imaginable.
I get it.
When Barbenheimer happened, I was like, the thing is that you go see Barbie and then you see Oppenheimer and you get them both together. And she's like, no, I'm just going to see Barbie. And I think she ended up seeing Barbie twice. So yeah, I think the Odyssey will do pretty good considering that first weekend is selling pretty well, pretty steadily.
Yep. You should have a decent forecast of how that's going to do.
Okay, let's bring Andrew back in for our news segment. We'll start with something that I know that Andrew saw as well, and that's Hugh Jackman is attached to a new movie with director Ridley Scott, and it's an adaptation of Treasure Island. Also, the third notable person attached is, I guess, the screenwriter of the wildly successful Netflix miniseries Adolescence, which won just about every TV miniseries award imaginable. This is it's fascinating that Ridley Scott is still booked and busy doing movies. when he is the young age of 88, surprisingly. So, Andrew, I don't have any history with Treasure Island outside of knowing that it's a, pretty popular IP or significant IP. I'm kind of leaning on you on this one. Do you have history of Treasure Island?
I mean, I'd call it a classic novel. Yeah,
Yes. Me too.
It's a well loved story, and it's I think it pops up every couple of years. I don't know what the history of what it is in film and what the adaptations have been, but it's just it's a it's a classic. I don't know much about it beyond that. I think I read it when I was a kid, and I haven't really touched it since. But it's got I can see Hugh Jackman as a pirate.
Mm-hmm.
I think what will be interesting with this one is how much they rely on live action in in camera effects as opposed to CGI. If you think back to like other recent pirate movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, when they did a lot of those effects practically, it really worked well. I mean, there's a lot of CGI in those films, but it's really hard to replicate the experience of going out on a ship in the ocean and making it feel real. And I will see something of that later this year with the Odyssey. So I'll be interested to see sort of how it plays out. If it's early in that development, and people are attached and people get detached, but really, like, pirates are fun. Ridley Scott's pretty good at what he does, and Hugh Jackman's pretty good at what he does. So there's a whole bunch of good factors for it there, and I'll be interested to see what it looks like.
I guess what surprises me, you mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean and like how successful those movies were, that we've had so few pirate movies since those movies came out. It's like they kind of like took over the market, and that was it. There was just room for one. I guess almost similar to like Jurassic Park, where the only like comparison to Jurassic Park is something like a Godzilla movie, right? Like a kaiju.
I mean, they're hard to do, right? I mean, again, it's an environment that's not very conducive of filming, especially if you want to get it looking really good. And I think part of the it'll as I said, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like when they start to put together the production, and like are they going to film it like if they do it like all on a big volume set. I think that probably wouldn't be quite as good, but I kind of wonder if directors are going to start sort of looking at like what Christopher Nolan has been doing, or what other directors who are really putting a lot of those effects in the camera and not just relying on like studios or volume sets or excessive CGI. They're just hard to do. I mean, I'm trying to think of what other films are similar. The only one I could really think of is Master and Commander. And I think that was I don't know how much that was done practically. I imagine a good portion of it. I just remember falling asleep in the theater for that, but I've been meaning to go back to it because I remember hearing it's very good. And
it is very good audio. It's I think it won an award for its audio soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's like one of those films that's really endured. So, but like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to do. And pirates are just, they used to be really big. And maybe that's just one of those cyclical things where they're really popular for a while, and they'll go away, and then they'll just, there'll be a new take on it, and there'll be a bunch of other ones that are coming out. So, but, and if memory serves, there's been talks of a couple of Pirates of the Caribbean movies being in development somewhere, and
that's true.
Some with Jack Sparrow and some without him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's just funny you mentioned Master and Commander. I just saw like one of the film T-shirt companies that I like to buy stuff from, Super Yaki, that I think they had either a limited release or it might still be available release of their like really fun Master and Commander T-shirt that has like the opening logo, and it says like oceans are battlefields now, and it's just I have a soft spot for Master and Commander. I think that movie's pretty cool. But moving on from that, we have an update on our discussion on Netflix, Evan. I guess like 2 weeks ago, when we last met, we talked about Greta Gerwig's Narnia and how Netflix was, moving it into 27 with more ambitious theatrical plans than just like maybe a 1 or 2 week exclusive rollout to IMAX. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like they're going to give Greta Gerwig really what she wants, which was a big theatrical experience. But in a discussion with Hollywood Reporter, one of the heads of Netflix, Dan Lin, clarified that their decision with Narnia was pretty much a one-off, and that they would rather work with directors that would agree to their streaming stipulations and not bend the knee to other directors. I don't know if what they were deciding with Narnia, if it was just too sweet a deal to get her on board, and they were like, oh, we could really have this fantastic franchise if we put it together. But it must have been too good to pass up. But I think the other example, Evan, is like David Fincher kind of gets his way a little bit, and he's doing that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood spinoff of Brad Pitt that's getting kind of like a small theatrical engagement too. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting because I think we were both kind of wondering aloud last time, what is this? Does this signal a shift in their strategy long term? And they're saying, no, it doesn't. So it's cool to get an answer to that question. But I agree with you. I think they probably thought, Greta Gerwig, we're grabbing her for Narnia. Probably a combination of she's done big business at the box office, so we'd be idiots not to release this in theaters. And also like the scope and scale of the Narnia franchise makes sense for theatrical, because like a lot of the other stuff is smaller time movies that they're putting out there. They don't have the I don't know. I feel like they don't often require like a big theatrical release. Like as much as I love like the Knives Out movies or other things that they're putting out there, I feel like seeing them in theaters is less essential. So I'm kind of fine with them being like, all right, we'll throw it in theaters for like 1 or 2 weeks and then ship it to Netflix.
Andrew, I didn't see the Zack Snyder, like his attempt at like Star Wars or like a sci-fi opera. Would have that been, you think, like, well, that must have cost Netflix a pretty penny, right? Do you think like that would have been maybe something that
Would it have been a good franchise? You have to have good base material to start any sort of franchise, and that film doesn't have very many redeeming qualities at all. I only saw the first one, and I just remember my wife and I just sort of hate watching it and just like, what the hell is this? I mean, it's ambitious. It looks kind of fun. It's definitely like, let's throw all these ideas into a blender and have fun with it. And so I can appreciate it for that. But like, it felt a little overly designed as a franchise, and I think that's sort of one of the traps that studios fall into, is like, we're going to make this big overarching thing. We're going to have 500 movies in this direction and some tie-in television shows with about all these minor characters, and we'll throw in some comic books and some novels along the way and a video game while we're at it. And they never go anywhere because the first thing that comes out is so engineered by committee that it just sucks. And that's sort of what I think. I don't know that this one is really engineered by committee in so much that it's just like it's all the same ideas as Star Wars with not really great execution. And it just doesn't, they did 2 films. I'm pretty sure it was just one big massive one that they split into 2 parts, and they said something like they're going to do like 3 more. And there's going to be like an animated show and a bunch of things. I could be misremembering tie-in shows, but they had a lot of pretty ambitious plans for it. And it's just, it would have worked if they had like a good starting point for it. And I think that's sort of where, franchises really come from, is you have a really good germ of an idea and a really, good film that a lot of people like. And that gives you a good springboard. You don't really know it's good until it's done. And you can't, I think so. I think in a lot of cases, they sort of get ahead of themselves. Very rarely will you see a project work. I mean, like Lord of the Rings comes to mind, but that was also kind of weird because it was filmed, all 3 films all at the same time. So there's, a lot of continuity between them.
Right. Certainly. If Fellowship of the Ring stunk, you would know that the other 2 kind of stunk. Right?
Yeah. But they filmed them all at the same time. And, you basically have, a very consistent look and feel throughout them. You don't have like the studio taking a break for 2 years while they figure out the script. It's all done one and done. And maybe they were trying to do something like that with Rebel Moon, but I don't know. It's just I think a lot of studios just sort of get ahead of themselves, and because just the economics of films these days, it's so expensive to make a film. You need to sort of build in the pipeline to sequels in the thing that you're doing. And if it doesn't work and you only have one film, you have this sort of film that's like, oh, this is part of a world, but it's just, I can see where they want to go with it, but there's nothing else there. And that's a real shame. I'm trying to think of like where I've seen other instances of that.
Even like Mortal Engines was something that they thought was going to be bigger. And
yeah, just because we're talking about Rebel Moon, I can, there's a lot of things I can see with that. I'm just trying to think of like what other ones have they. It was clear that they're trying to start something, and my mind's a blank right at the moment, but I'm sure something will come to me eventually.
I'm sure every day Netflix would love to buy a movie like K-pop Demon Hunters from Sony for pennies on the dollar and be able to transform that into their biggest movie ever.
And that's sort of the other problem, is that when you have a film that is really good and it stands on its own, that doesn't necessarily mean that a sequel is going to work. Because, if it ties everything up into one cohesive story, it's like we don't need anything else to follow it. Like we've gotten enough closure from these characters. They've done what they set out to do. The only way you can really sort of build on it is to make up the stakes and make them keep getting more and more powerful or more along on their journey. And that doesn't always work well. One film that actually does come to mind that is getting a sequel is War Machine, the new Alan Richardson, the Netflix film about a bunch of Rangers encountering an alien invasion.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's big and dumb, and there's a lot of fun. And then you're watching it, and there's sort of the obligatory scene at the end where they're like, "All right, well now we're going off to the fight," and it's like, "All right, well there's your sequel," but like you've already had this pretty basic character arc. And it's like, all right, well, what else are they going to do with it other than basically the same thing they did in the first movie?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten a little off what we were talking about.
I was bringing us back to alien invasion, so.
But yeah, I think that's why Netflix kind of invested in Greta Gerwig and Narnia in the hopes of having something big that they could entice people with on their platform. And it's clear that they don't necessarily want to take big swings like that in the future, and that they're happy with their pipeline of releasing a new movie every weekend. I think there was a new movie this past weekend, Evan, on Netflix called like Office Romance, and I was like,
oh yeah, I want to see that.
I'm like, this is a movie with familiar actors, and I'm like,
yeah,
that's
Brett Goldstein and J-Lo, love them.
Yeah,
the two of them.
I'm like that's kind of what Netflix likes these days.
Yep, and I'm all about it as long as it's not bad like Ladies First. Yikes.
All right, that does it for our news today, and we're going to transition into our feature discussion on Steven Spielberg and his films featuring aliens, those creatures from outer space, and which includes movies such as Close Encounters, E.T., War of the Worlds, and his upcoming movie Disclosure Day that Evan and I had a chance to screen last night. Andrew also wanted to mention Spielberg's miniseries that he executive produced, Taken. Evan, when I was writing my Disclosure Day review this morning, I remembered that these are not the only movies that Spielberg really did aliens with. He also did it with Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, but I think we're going to not talk about that one during this episode.
I think that's a wise choice, unless you want my blood to start boiling.
I mean, it fits really well with his aesthetic, and if you look at the history of UFO encounters, from like the Foo Fighters in World War II to Roswell to all the way up to the 20th century, Spielberg bringing in aliens to Indiana Jones does make a little bit of sense because it sort of fits in that timeline. It fits with the really pulpy nature of what Indiana Jones was intended to be. I rewatched it a couple years ago, and I was not like offended by it. I didn't really like enjoy it as much as the other ones, but I still do rank it above Temple of Doom personally.
Andrew, you should listen to me. Maybe a few years back, I did an episode on all the Indiana Jones movies, and after watching them all in succession, I made the statement that I didn't think there was a bad Indiana Jones movie. I think they're all pretty entertaining, and each has its own merits. Certainly, a Spielberg adventure film is better than most.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But back in the 70s, right? Spielberg decided that he was going to follow up the quite literally monster success of Jaws, which kind of defined summer blockbusters forever. It kind of like coined the term and changed cinema history quite a bit with the release of Jaws, and still probably one of my favorite films of all time. He decided to go in a different direction with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This one starring one of his Jaws stars, Richard Dreyfuss, and the story was really about a man, has a kind of encounter with aliens, and he all of a sudden either becomes obsessed, possessed, whatever you want to say. He does, but he decides to abandon his family and go on a quest to meet these aliens that have reached out to him in some way. Andrew, what is your experience with Close Encounters? Do you remember the first time you saw this one?
Yeah, I have a really, I guess personal story with this. Like, so I sort of came to science fiction with Star Wars in 1997, and I'm trying to remember when. Like so when I was growing up, I was never really big into films. My parents we didn't really watch TV a lot. We didn't really watch a ton of films. We did go to the theaters every now and then, but it wasn't until I got into high school and college, mostly with college, when I started to really get into film and television and things like that. Close Encounters was re-released on DVD. I'm not remembering exactly when. I think it was sort of like another special edition type situation, because he changed a couple of things. He added some scenes, some stuff that had been cut in the originally, and he sort of had some thoughts on. And I remember picking it up on DVD probably when I was in college, and just being blown away by it, and it just thinking like, this is really an incredible film, and just sort of really sort of understanding like what film could do a little bit, more than just like, wow, this is cool. And I also remember also being somewhat, I don't want to say confused, but just not quite like maybe there's a little bit of gap in my understanding of what it was. And that's something I've sort of noticed with Spielberg's films over the years, is like he just sort of drops you in and assumes that you have all the context. You see it with Munich, you see it with The Post, and just there's a lot of context around them that he sort of, I think, assumes that you know. And Close Encounters is like this. I think he sort of assumes that you know what the culture of what UFO culture was like in the 1970s, and certainly if you're watching it, then you would be a little bit more aware of it than you would be, nearly 50 years later. I just remember being really blown away by it, and just being really like, wow, this is a really cool film, and just the visuals were astounding. The story was just, really fantastic. When I went back to rewatch it, I was just blown away all over again. And when I visited the Smithsonian's Air and Space Museum over in Virginia, they actually have a model of the spaceship on display in the same gallery as one of the space shuttle they have, which was really cool. So that's sort of my connection to it. It's one that I've gone to every couple of years, and I just always really love it.
Evan, you were telling me that you revisited the movie for our discussion, or ahead of our discussion. Do you remember if you were more fond of it in the past, or if it still held up to you on this rewatch?
Well, I came a lot later to it than a lot of people. It was one of those Spielberg movies that it was on my list for a very long time, and I didn't see it for the first time until maybe a year, 2 years ago. It's fairly recent. And yeah, rewatching it again, honestly, I was not enjoying it as much on second viewing. I don't know if maybe it was my mood or what. I will say that the cinematography in it is quite striking, and that was something that I enjoyed. I mean, I think it really, like a lot of Spielberg's movies, captures the kind of sense of like awe and wonder of the like search for aliens and life, outside of our planet. I think that's all done very effectively. It's interesting watching it and seeing the influence it's had on so many other films in the genre. Like, I was just looking back at my notes from the first time I saw it. Is like you see the influence in movies like Nope, Contact, Arrival, like Super 8, especially because like J.J. Abrams is literally just aping
Yeah.
Spielberg. And so yeah, it's like it's a really iconic movie, and I understand why it's iconic. It's got this incredible score. It's got incredible cinematography. It's very like when you have movies where characters are like trying to like unravel or mysteries or investigate things, and they have this like obsession with it that is like taking over their lives, like that is also very compelling, because like Richard Dreyfuss is just like so one track mind about this, and it's just like willing to like basically like abandon his family to go on this like quest. And I know that there's also a lot of like Spielberg's kind of like personal life also was kind of like wrapped up in this a little bit, and like some stuff that he was going through personally. And so like even though it wasn't resonating as much for me on rewatch, I understand why it's like iconic and why it resonates and why people think of it so fondly.
Yeah, I remember just like falling head over heels for this movie, and I remember being like the biggest fan of Richard Dreyfuss, like after I'd seen this, and like unfortunately now I know he's a total jerk.
Yeah.
Like when like he's asked to do like Jaws, like Remembrance, like nobody wants him around, which is too bad because he's really great in this movie. I have a lot of fun with his performance, and as you say, his obsession. I like the idea that like he's molding his mashed potatoes into this like into Devil's Peak, which is all he can see in his mind. You mentioned Spielberg having problems at the time, which we would see later in his filmography, like The Fabelmans, and see that like he had this idea of like kind of broken families. So like that was kind of his life, or what affected him for a lot of it. And he could see Richard Dreyfuss just kind of up and leaving his family. And I think I saw featurettes later, him talking about working on this movie and how later in his life he could never imagine leaving his family, and like he couldn't have wrote Close Encounters later in life.
And that's something that sort of sits through the I haven't seen Disclosure Day yet, but it sits through Close Encounters, E.T., and War of the Worlds. I was literally watching War of the Worlds earlier today, and the idea of broken families is pretty central in that as well as it is with E.T.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the score too, Evan. John Williams, he's been working with Spielberg seemingly forever to come up with this idea that we would communicate with aliens with music, and he makes this like musical pattern that when you think about that movie, it's just like da 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 da. Like I haven't seen the movie in ages,
right? Yeah. And it's like even for me, not having seen the movie, like it's like I knew about that. It's like something even if you've never seen Close Encounters, that sound plays an integral role in the movie.
You caught the reference to in Project Hail Mary, right?
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, they do that real briefly. When I don't remember exactly when. I'd have to rewatch Project Hail Mary again, but I remember being like, "That's fun."
Right, and like when Close Encounters, not only do they show it like near the end of the big board, but it's also like it's almost like a civilization is doing like a chant, and like it's like a whole, like I don't know if it's monks.
Oh yeah, the people in India that are like doing the chant.
Yeah, that's really cool. And outside of Richard Dreyfuss, Spielberg had some other interesting people involved. I think that there was like a director that it plays like the scientist or something.
Oh, Truffaut.
Yeah, and that's a pretty memorable part. And no, I dig Close Encounters. I remember though laughing when I know it's terrible of me when like the lead actress is like yelling after her boy for not like don't go outside. She's like Barry. I'm just like I know that you're like really in distress here, but like I can't help myself.
At the same time, once you have kids, you realize, oh wait, they don't actually listen to you, and
Yep,
my daughter
it's
might
true.
actually do something like that.
Yeah, true.
Before we move off of Close Encounters, there's a book that I read earlier this year called by Garrett Graff, and it's he's a sort of a government reporter. He's written a whole bunch of books, including some oral. He wrote an oral history for my day job at the Vermont Historical Society, as well as one about last year Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombs. It's called UFO: The Inside Story of the U.S. Government's Search for Alien Life Here and Out There, and it's basically a history of of UFOs from throughout the 20th century, but without a lot of the sensationalism around it. He's basically looking at like what are the when the government was actually saying that we're looking for extraterrestrial life, what does that mean? Like what are we doing to look for it? And it basically tracks a lot of that early 20th century history. Looking at like what happened at what happened at Roswell, talks about balloons and like what types of programs were there, looks at things like that. And I found it was really interesting to see. I watched Close Encounters right after I finished it, and it really sort of complements it really nicely because it sort of explains the culture and explains sort of what Spielberg was picking up and what he was translating into film. So looking at the lights in the sky, like the people who were saying that they were contacted and the very fervent devotion and or obsession that they had, it feels like that it really sort of provided like that extra nugget of context that I didn't have because I wasn't growing up at the time. And it sort of explains a bit more of Close Encounters, and I feel like I got a little bit more out of it after reading this book, just because it just provided that extra bit of context.
Thank you.
And in a way, it sort of I think it also explains a little bit about how Spielberg, approaches alien encounters, and in his films from then on.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned something, Andrew, that you had seen like a special edition or like another edition, and I think like the studio asked Spielberg or gave him a whole bunch of money to say like, oh, do you want to film the inside of the UFO?
I don't think that was it. I think it was. I just looked it up. There's a release in 2001 for one of it was sort of a not quite an anniversary, but they basically spruced up some of the special effects a little bit, and they did incorporate some of the scenes that were cut. I don't remember in that edition they don't show the inside of the ship. I think that they did. I think they filmed it, but I don't think I've seen those shots. They might be up on YouTube or something, but it looks just. I did a little bit of looking while we were talking, and it looks like there's a couple of other. There's a bunch of different editions that have come out over the years, and the one that I saw was when they specifically released it. Sorry, my dog is smaller.
Having a good time.
Dogs
Don't worry, we're very pro dog people.
So they did like a special edition. But the one I'm thinking of is I think it's called the collector's edition.
Okay.
But there's a theatrical edition, the collector's edition, special edition, director's cut. There's a whole bunch.
Sounds like Blade Runner.
Yeah,
but to that point, I insist that if people do watch Close Encounters, you don't want to see the part where if you have a choice to see like inside the alien ship, you don't need to see it. You can just skip that. I feel like sometimes that kind of thing is like best left to the imagination. Yeah.
Oh, did they include it in one of the editions?
Yeah, like I've seen.
That's not the one I've seen then.
I've seen the edition of it, and I'm just like, it didn't need to be there. Yeah.
It's sort of like it's like going into ET's ship. It's like you don't really
or it's like changing ET, like the cops of the guns, and changing it to like
the walkie-talkies,
right?
Yeah,
walkie-talkies, which is great because we're gonna get into ET now, and even as big as Jaws was, ET was almost. I don't have the box office numbers in front of me, but I know ET was a monster too, and kind of like overshadowed everything that came out in the summer of 1982. It's been a topic or a year that we've talked about a great deal on this podcast before, as Blade Runner was just mentioned. That was the summer of Blade Runner, The Thing, Poltergeist, and a number of other movies, but E.T. kind of overshadowed all of that, and was this just like incredible movie where you had the puppet of E.T., the power of physical things, right? Because if you think about it now, like if ET was like a CGI, forget about it. It's just like knowing that ET was a physical puppet and really added a layer of believability to him. And again, Andrew, you brought up this idea of broken family, and it's a family of a mother and an older brother who loves D&D, and the middle child boy, and the younger sister played by a very young Drew Barrymore. And
yeah, that film was very explicitly built by Spielberg, to contend with his own family baggage. I mean, that is very much a coming to terms with his parents' divorce and separation, and that was a big part of that. It wasn't. I guess it was. It's got a slightly different flavor from Close Encounters, just because you sort of see from the dad the father Roy just becoming obsessed with this idea that this vision that's been planted in his head, and in this one it's the kid trying to make sense of it and trying to find some sort of stability in this very new environment that he's in, and happens to have an alien land in his backyard.
I've heard that being the middle child is very difficult. So,
speaking as the older child, they are very difficult.
So I in this movie, the father is an absentee father. He's not really around. He promises he'll visit and he doesn't. And our lead boy here is, he looks to his new alien friend E.T. as not only, maybe a friend or a pet, almost like this familiar figure that he can attach himself to. The movie, kind of starts with him kind of training E.T. Elliot, that's his name, the boy's name. It's important to have names. Elliot is training E.T. with Reese's Pieces, which became a very hot candy at the time, thanks to the movie, leading him into the house one piece of candy at a time.
Yeah, Eminem turned him down.
Yeah,
very famously. It was a kind of a mistake, and then Reese's
still kicking themselves for that,
being the biggest film of the year.
And there's a lot of really great, memorable scenes in E.T. Ones that would go on to inspire many other franchises, including Stranger Things. When you watch E.T., you can see how much Stranger Things takes from that. But I won't say that Stranger Things is shy about what it takes from, because it is very much meant to kind of 80s films. Certainly, E.T. was a big influence on that.
Something that's also worth noting is that Poltergeist came out in the same year, and Spielberg sort of conceived of Poltergeist and E.T. The sort of the same. They both sort of came from the same place, and he very famously sort of shadow directed Poltergeist.
Yeah.
But they were sort of two sides of the same coin. One was sort of this loving, warm, heartwarming story, and the other one is this very scary film. And so it's just kind of interesting. I saw Poltergeist, it was ages ago, but it's one of those things where they sort of complement one another. Because I think the original idea for Poltergeist, and I might be misremembering, was an alien invasion film of aliens trying to get into the house, and then they sort of split the two ideas apart.
Yeah, instead made it a haunted house possession type of thing.
There's a book that came out 2 years ago called "The Future Is Now" by Chris Nashawati, and it's basically the history of the summer of 1982. So he talks about E.T., Poltergeist, Blade Runner, Tron, Conan the Barbarian, The Thing, and what else? Star Trek and Mad Max, Road Warrior, and sort of looks at how this 1 year had all these big science fiction movies get stuffed in there.
Yeah, I think I had someone else who wrote something on 1982 as well, because it is such a ripe year for film.
Yeah, and E.T. blew them all out of the water. And it's kind of funny because like we think about Blade Runner and The Thing being these huge classics, and they were just steamrolled critically and at the box office, and they've since had this real reappraisal. The decades since.
For me, when it came to ET, I came to it really late. For some reason, like I think my brother had a stuffed animal of ET because my brother's 6 years older than me, and I saw that thing and I was totally creeped out. I was like, I want nothing to do with ET. It took me a number of years to actually see the movie. I was not surprised about how funny and moving it could be, but like maybe just how high the stakes get. It feels you know you're not really prepared for where this movie goes. I mean, everybody's seen Elliot and ET fly over the moon. I mean, Universal had that as their logo for a number of years. But anything else is kind of a surprise. Evan, what's your experience of ET?
So I don't remember when I saw it for the first time as a kid, but I saw it as a kid and I became obsessed with it. I watched it a lot. Like a lot. To the point where at some point I watched it so many times that I like burned myself out on it and wasn't able to watch it for like at least a decade or more. I think the last time I saw it was in college. Like I think a friend had never seen it or said like, oh, let's sit down and watch ET. And that was the last time I've seen it. And that's probably almost 20 years ago. But I remember loving it as a kid because, getting back to what I was saying before about that sense of awe and wonder that Spielberg is able to convey with his films that explore like the supernatural or the like the aliens, dinosaurs, what have you. But also I think as a very like empathetic kid, I really connected with like Elliot and everything that's going on him in like ET and this the fact that he's like on Earth and there's so many confusing things that he's trying to like sort through, and that's this connection between the two of them and how they're sharing that connection, like the whole thing about like Elliot fleeing, getting freeing the frogs that are about to be dissected, and like getting drunk, and the fact that like at certain point, like Elliot's dying, ET's dying. It's like, oh my god, this is like so sad. But like it is also like so like heartwarming about this like friendship between them. And like ultimately, I thank God, a happy ending. Thankfully, the government does not get their hands on ET at the end. That he is able to escape. He is able to go home. So yeah, I mean, it's just like I loved it as a kid. I feel like I kind of need to go back to it, but I also was not ready at this point. We were talking about. I was like, I don't think I have it in me emotionally to go back to ET because it's so like loaded for me.
To use lingo that I think the kids are using these days, I think like the last 20 minutes of that movie is absolutely goated. It's like you have them escaping with ET on their bikes. That's such like a classic sequence of them. Like,
yeah.
The freedom that a bicycle gives you as a child, and being able to just like run away from the cops and run away from the kind of like I want to say almost faceless antagonist, because he goes by the name Keys for a lot of this movie, and you just see the keys jangling from his pocket, to where Elliot is finally, they've made their mission of saving ET, but then they haven't maybe come to terms with what saving ET actually means, and that there's no possible way that ET can possibly stay with them. And I was talking about the other day on Blue Sky, like John Williams has a piece of music that kind of like runs through that last 15 to 20 minutes of ET. Andrew knows from Star Wars. I mean, Williams has written many excellent pieces over the years.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that something so good that like this could become like maybe like his 20th or 25th best composition that he's ever written, compared to so many more. And what a fantastic movie ET is.
Yeah, it's really good. I really do need to go back to it at some point. I just feel like I need to like really emotionally gird myself.
Andrew, do you have anything to add on ET?
I don't think. I mean, other than I was just trying to think back to it. That is probably I want to say I saw that before I saw Star Wars. I remember it being having it as VHS as a kid, and it's just kind of odd because my parents were not science fiction fans. I have no idea where they got it or why they got it. But I do remember watching it as a kid and being really just kind of amazed by it and just, also scared. I mean, at the point,
Mhm.
I mean, when I was really little, I
Mhm.
went and not too long ago, maybe last year, I showed it to my daughter who's now 6, and she just absolutely loved it. Like
Mm.
she loved ET. She thought he was cute, and I have to go show it to her again at some point. But yeah, just that's one that just, I mean, it's a classic. It holds up, and it's just such a good movie.
Yeah, awesome. For a number of years, Spielberg would go in a different direction other than aliens. He would explore movies with Jurassic Park, asking us if humans were right to play God with creating creatures. He would explore the Holocaust in the same year as Jurassic Park with his Oscar-winning film Schindler's List. What a year for him with those two masterpieces. Later, he would do the Normandy Beach D-Day arrival with Saving Private Ryan, which is iconic in its own right. He was, of course, not done with science fiction throughout the years. He would famously cover a Philip K. Dick novel with Minority Report, which an excellent film. That would be his first collaboration with Tom Cruise, which he would quickly follow up with a collaboration with Cruise once again on a new adaptation of the H.G. Wells classic War of the Worlds, which hadn't seen a movie release at that point in some 50, 60 odd years. The movie was kind of, the perfect kind of idea at the time. It was coming off a few years removed from 9/11. It had a lot of our fears of others included, people that we didn't know. We as a people, I speak as an American, we were fearful of these assailants or these terrorist groups that we just were faceless, and we speaking for myself, was slightly terrified, certainly after the aftermath of 9/11. And his answer, Spielberg's answer at least, was to revisit this material and kind of position it to match our times in when he released it in 2005. I had a chance to rewatch it for the first time in 20 years, and I'll share my thoughts shortly on this Spielberg and Cruise collaboration. But Evan, when was the last time you watched Spielberg and Cruise's War of the Worlds?
Max, I've never seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yep. Have not seen it.
I would say I don't know. I don't know what you're missing. Certainly, I'm eager to hear Andrew's thoughts on the movie because I believe he rewatched it for our discussion on Spielberg. And yeah, Andrew, did you get a lot of that flavor text that I kind of threw in there for War of the Worlds, or did you view it
Yeah,
differently?
I literally watched it like 4 hours ago, so it's very fresh in mind. It's a weird film. I remember seeing, so it came out 2005. That's sort of when I was started to really start to follow science fiction fantasy films. I remember at the time it had a really interesting production where they were, it filmed in a very short period of time, like just, I think like 70 days, something like that. And they were shooting it and cutting it and editing it all like simultaneously. So it came together very quickly. It looks like a Spielberg film. It's got the lights. It's a lot darker than either Close Encounters or E.T., and I think that's deliberate. It's certainly a post 9/11 film, and he's certainly looking at taking on this story and this very different variation on this theme for him. But at the same time, it's also dealing with a family that's broken, and this time it's a father who's sort of his ex-wife, it's his weekend, so he takes the kids, and aliens show up minutes later and start blowing everything up, and he's trying to escape. And yeah, I never really appreciated it before when I first saw it. I've probably only seen it like 2 or 3 times at this point. But it's really a film about a father who's terrified and trying to figure out what to do. Whereas the first Close Encounters is about somebody becoming so obsessed that he loses track of his family, and another one where the father's just absent. This is a father who's trying to like hold his not really realizing what he's missing until like it's about to be ripped away from him. And Yeah, it's a really interesting film. There's some weird choices to it, like the aliens instead of landing in giant pods like in the original novel, like they were buried underground for however many millions of years, which I thought was kind of weird. But it I don't know. I don't know if it like holds up. It feels very much like Minority Report, which is a much better film. Visually, he's doing all the same stuff. There are scenes that are very similar, like when John Anderton is hiding from the pre-crime spiders, and they're sort of crawling through the house to try to get and identify him. And it's the same exact scene when he's in the basement of the house and the aliens, the pod is trying to get to him. And it's basically just it's Tom Cruise running from and trying to stay ahead of the threat. So I don't know that it's certainly not one of the three Alien films that he's done. It's probably his least, the one that I like the least. But it's interesting. It's good. It's entertaining. It looks like a Spielberg film, and it takes this very classic story of alien invasion and updates it. And it's one of the strengths of War of the Worlds, is that it's really a good look at how it does what good science fiction does, which is to sort of take our present day concerns and twists them in an interesting way. And that it could be because the original H.G. Wells novel, that was a story about English colonialism and colonialism going meeting a bad end. This one is pulling on all the same things from that immediate post 9/11 era, and just sort of putting this main character into a position where you just don't know what's going on, and all you can do is just try to escape. And that's basically what, if you want somebody to run away from something, Tom Cruise is really good for that. But also just trying to think of it in light of like how other stories did sort of post 9/11 stuff. I have to say, I think Minority Report was a little bit more, it hit a little harder just because it was a little bit more poignant and a little bit more thoughtful about it. Battlestar Galactica certainly tackled a lot of those same issues around the same time, especially around, what is our moral compass, and how do we deal with threats from within, and how do we make sure that we're not losing who we are. This one is basically just, adrenaline rush and escape as quickly as possible and try to hold on to what you have. And so I can really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, it had been a while since I rewatched it, and so I was eager to see what I thought about it now. And I remember one of the biggest reservations I had when I watched War of the Worlds for the first time is this almost fairy tale ending that Spielberg has on the end of the movie. And I saw a lot of other people kind of up in arms about that, and with frustration or anger. And I wanted to watch the movie again because I remember it being well, this is 90% of a good movie. And if we're going to say that the movie is disposable based on its ending, I don't know if that's necessarily fair. So I was eager to give it another fair shot. But, the script doesn't really do it too much favors. I wrote about it on the newsletter recently, and there's a script shortcut of showing Tom Cruise's son wearing a Red Sox hat while he wears a Yankees hat, and you're like, oh, of course they're gonna be adversaries. I'm like, this is just easy to say.
That was something I thought that they dialed in really well. As I was rewatching it today, I was like, oh, this is a really honed in way to set up your characters really quickly. And it's a little, it's not entirely, I wouldn't say it's subtle, but it's very effective at what he does. And just a couple years ago, or maybe more than a couple years ago, Every Frame of Painting did a really great video about Spielberg oneers. And you just can't, now once you sort of see them point that out, you can't help but notice it everywhere. And it's very, the way Spielberg uses a camera to sort of telegraph what the characters are feeling and what they're doing, it's firing on all cylinders there. And yeah, the kid's a little bratty, and he's really kind of an asshole, but teenagers are. And it really, he makes it work with it, without having to do too much.
Yeah, and talk about the kids in this one too. Spielberg had a penchant for working with children. Of course, Drew Barrymore and and the actor played Elliot in E.T. So it'd be pretty unsurprising that he'd be familiar working with children and finding good children actors. And I remember, so I was about 19 or 20 when I first saw War of the Worlds, and maybe I had no patience for kids, but like I just thought Dakota Fanning was really obnoxious at the time, like just screaming. Maybe that's how one would act in an alien invasion and being a small child. But
I mean, as somebody with kids about that with the same age spread, like I recognize my kids in there pretty effectively, and I thought like I think when I saw it way back when, like 20 years ago, yeah, it's like, oh, these are really young kids, but like now that I'm a parent, like, oh, I get it.
yeah, right. You can look at it from a different perspective. And I thought like one of the more compelling sequences, we've seen now so many movies have come out and television shows looking at how humanity is often worse than the threat. Like you can look at like Robert Kirkman's Walking Dead as like a prime example of that. And one of the scenes that stick out the most to me is like Bruce and his family are driving in like one of the last available cars, and just like everybody is just like trying to pull them out of the car by all means, if they had to punch them, knife them, whatever. And it's just a look at how low humanity would get in a tragic situation like that. And I think it's a really compelling sequence. Let's move ahead to Taken before Evan and I give our short opinions on Disclosure Day. Andrew, you said you wanted to mention the series.
Yeah, so actually, Dakota Fanning is a good segue because she's also in Taken. She's the lead actress there. If you haven't seen it, and you probably haven't because it's like impossible to find unless you go and dig up the DVDs somewhere, it was a 10-episode miniseries that the Sci-Fi Channel aired, I want to say in 2001, and it's very much looks like a Steven Spielberg thing. He was the executive producer on it. He didn't direct anything from it. I don't actually know that much about it. I have the DVDs and I have to sort of dig them out to look at some of the behind the scenes stuff. But what it is sort of this attempt to sort of pull together all of the various bits and pieces of UFO lore and mash them into one cohesive story, as if Earth had been visited by aliens. The sort of the gray stereotypical aliens that you have there. It starts way back in World War II with the Foo Fighters, which was these lights that pilots reported seeing over Europe, and then it jumps ahead a little bit to Roswell in 1947. And then basically from there, it follows these three families as they sort of get intertwined. One of them is a very sort of power hungry military officer who's at Roswell. One of them is a pilot who saw these things, and this it's same sort of thing with Close Encounters, sort of becomes obsessed with them and sort of has a very difficult time after the war. And then it sort of follows these families all the way up to about 2001. And there's a little bit, it's a little bit of Close Encounters, a little bit of ET, certainly a bit of X-Files in it. And it's just this really fascinating, I really enjoyed it when it was coming out, just this multi-generational story. And it presages a lot of like the sort of the prestige TV that we have today. I don't think it's quite as good as some of the prestige like miniseries that we had out there, but for the time it was quite good. But yeah, it just feels very much like it's in that vein of Steven Spielberg. Broken families dealing with their problems, with the aliens as a backdrop, and dealing with sort of first encounters. And over the course of the 10 episodes, you sort of realize that the aliens have this, these overarching intentions with the people that they've encountered in these families, and they're trying to sort of do some things with them over time. So you can find, I think some of the episodes are up on YouTube. I think if you look, it's certainly, if you want to be a completist for this genre, it's certainly worth checking out.
That's Taken, which was executive produced by Steven Spielberg.
I read the novelization when it came out. That's how into it I was. And I found it in a bookstore the other day, and I was like, I cannot leave the store without this. So I kind of want to go back and reread it and just sort of see how it holds up. But yeah.
Evan and I had a chance to take in Spielberg's most recent alien encounter movie, and that is Disclosure Day, which opens in theaters nationwide this Friday. It is Spielberg's latest attempt at tackling extraterrestrials, and it examines the idea of not only is there life out there, but if there is life out there, what would that mean to us and our faith? I think that it kind of is the other side of the coin of Close Encounters. I think I wrote that in my review of it, Evan, in that I think not only where Close Encounters is more just fascinated with the plight of a few individuals trying to reach their ultimate goal, this one really has an opposite mindset of what ramifications would this have for the many as opposed to the one. And it's maybe unsurprising that it kind of turns out this way. I think Spielberg asked his longtime collaborator David Coop, who he co-wrote Jurassic Park with and a number of other of his feature films, tasked him with kind of exploring this genre further, but without kind of aping his earlier movies. And you had mentioned, Evan, some other movies that maybe Close Encounters ended up inspiring. Ones that came to my mind while watching Disclosure Day were certainly other movies in the same vein, like John Carpenter's Starman, or more recently Jeff Nichols' Midnight Special, which I thought was pretty underseen. But I was a fan of Disclosure Day. I think it's pretty good. Evan, do you want to share some thoughts on it yourself, and maybe some overarching plot details?
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with you. That feels on a very similar wavelength to Starman in terms of like the tenor and the kind of like overall direction of the movie. Yeah. How do I share plot details about this without giving too much away?
I
feel
mean,
like
we know from the trailers that Emily Blunt is a news reporter, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, I mean, like I would say the central, I don't know, conflict of the movie is like aliens are real. There's a shadowy group that knows that they're real. They have all kinds of proof that they're real, and people on the inside have said, I'm tired of working for this organization. I'm tired of keeping this under wraps. People deserve to know we're not alone, and let's get that info out there. That's probably like the least spoilery way I can describe
Sure.
the movie.
I mean, the title kind of leads you to believe that it's going to be some kind of movie that is about the revealing of some kind of alien or extra life, right? Disclosure Day. In and of itself, the title, and kind of leads that on. This movie stars Emily Blunt and Josh O'Connor. Josh O'Connor has really come out in the last few years. He was in Guadagnino's Challengers with Zendaya. I thought he was pretty great in that, and even more recently, pretty much the lead in Ryan Johnson's Wake Up Dead Man, the latest chapter in Knives Out. And those two actors are joined by an ensemble cast of Colin Firth, Coleman Domingo. I think
Eve Hewson.
Yeah, Eve Hewson, which I sometimes I see actresses I've seen before, and then like I'm like, I know her from somewhere, and I saw her in the movie Flora and Son, which was another John Carney musical.
Yep, and Apple TV release, Max. In case you gotta get those Apple TV plugs in there.
Yeah, Apple TV, send us some money, please. I don't know. I told you, Evan, that I was positive on it. I gave it a B+ in my review, and it seems to be doing pretty well for itself on Rotten Tomatoes. If you're a proponent of review scores, are you thumbs up or thumbs down on this one?
I'm definitely a thumbs up. I think the movie is a little long. It clocks in around 2.5 hours. It feels like it's a little long in the tooth. I think, like other Spielberg movies, it kind of veers at points into saccharine and honestly in some places just straight up corny territory, which I didn't love, but I think the performances are all really solid, like especially Josh O'Connor and Emily Blunt, and especially when their characters have kind of like been on parallel paths and then they come together. That works really well. It's still, I'm just probably tired of hearing this, listeners, but it does capture that sense of awe and wonder that I've said that Spielberg is famous for. I think the movie is definitely, it's tense. There are some pretty good action set pieces in this. Additionally, like there was one involving a train that I was just like gripping my armrest. And I thought it was like lose circulation in my hands because it was so tense. And yeah, overall, I thought it was really solid. There's some questionable like editing choices I think in here. There's some scenes where I'm kind of like that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But at points where I'm kind of like I'll suspend my disbelief a little bit, even though I'm sitting here going, I don't know if that entirely works.
It's kind of like Spielberg is inviting you on this ride, and you just kind of go for the ride.
Yeah, exactly. It's very satisfying in that way, and it definitely contains echoes of Close Encounters and E.T. and this, especially this like on the run from the government, shadowy organizations, and are we going to get away in time? That kind of similar.
Yeah. And like how I mentioned earlier, John Williams, he once again contributes a score to a Steven Spielberg movie. Now at the young age of 93 years old, I wonder how many more films he'll be contributing for or doing this. He had famously said that Dial of Destiny was going to be his final composition, but he's still here, and I guess he still wanted to work. So
yeah, I don't remember the score of this being particularly iconic, sadly, as much as I love John Williams. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this. And I think if you like Spielberg, you're going to like this movie. I can't see people like who enjoy Spielberg's films just sitting down and be like, I hate this. Maybe like it's not as good as some of his others, but I can't see him going, this sucks.
Well, I know there was like this funny backlash against like Ready Player One when that came out, right? Because it was like such this like best-selling book, and everybody kind of were like tired of like this is just like IP bonanza.
Yeah, I just think as a fan of that book, it's just not a good adaptation of it. I think it's just a crap adaptation of what could have. Yeah, I think there are ways they could have done better, but that's a whole tangent I could go on, and I'm not gonna go there.
There's your next episode right there.
All right, so that's our discussion on Steven Spielberg and extraterrestrials. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into some of his works. We're going to pause for some station identification before doing a quick what we've been watching section. You've been listening to the It's the Pictures podcast. Once again, your host, Max Colville. You can follow me on most social media platforms, including Blue Sky, where I can be found at maxcolville.com. You can also follow the podcast on Letterboxd or Blue Sky. Look for us at either It's the Pic Pod or It's the Pictures, all one word. Our YouTube channel is always posting clips from the episodes as well as full episodes you can find there. That's also can be found at It's the Pigeons. What else do I want to plug? Oh yes, my own Letterboxd. You can follow me on Letterboxd at MH Colville. I often share what I've been watching. If it's a movie, unfortunately, if it's like one of the many video games or TV shows that I'm taking in, I can't log those. I love the log.
You can share them in the newsletter.
Yeah, I'll get to newsletter later. Evan, where can they find you?
So you can hear me every week over at Spoiler Piece Theater, the weekly film review podcast. And you can follow me on social media, although I admit I'm not the most active there these days. If you see me update Letterboxd, that's about as much as you might see me post on social media. But you can follow me as Real Recon, and that's real as in film real.
You can also contact us via email at itsthepictures@gmail.com if you'd like to send us your thoughts about our recent episode or yell at us about our Spielberg opinions. Our guest, Andrew Liptak, where can people find you?
You can find me at andrewliptak.com, and that's my newsletter, Transfer Orbit. And I'm on a bunch of different social media platforms, but that's mostly where you find me.
I saw that you're trying to build out a Reddit page too. Did you want to plug that one too?
Sure. It's reddit.com, and it's r Transfer Orbit as the subreddit. So come and chat.
Sweet.
Yeah, awesome. And Andrew's newsletter is on the Ghost platform like mine, and I certainly looked for him as an example when I was moving away from Substack, and I found moving away from that platform very rewarding on a moral level. if nothing else. So enjoying my time on Ghost, and I enjoy my time interacting with Andrew in his newsletter. And one of my favorite stories that Andrew puts out every month, which is one of the biggest reasons why I followed him through his newsletter. He does a monthly report of the upcoming fantasy and science fiction novels, and I always find a novel or two to add to either my library request list or things that I want to read. He also has great interviews with many authors in the fantasy and science fiction genre. So if you love reading, Transfer Orbit makes a great companion to this movie TV kind of venture here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You can, again, follow the newsletter. It's thepitchers.com. I've been very busy at the newsletter over the last 5 days. Newsletter readers got news about the Odyssey tickets being available for sale. They got a post about the new Taylor Swift single for Toy Story 5 and how, in my opinion, Disney has bought itself a #1 single and possibly an Oscar nomination and maybe even a Taylor Swift performance at the Oscars, which would all be big money for Disney. I followed that up with a review this morning of Disclosure Day, sharing my thoughts there on the newsletter. So pretty busy. Now let's go ahead and head into what we've been watching. Evan, what have you been watching?
Well, recently I saw the movie Pool Man, which is Chris Pine's directorial debut from, I think, was it 2 years ago, maybe?
Oh, I'm interested in this. I've heard it was absolute garbage, so I wonder your take on it.
Yeah, it's not good. I'll say that. It's not good. It's interesting, though. It's about a guy who tends to a pool, of course, based on the name. But he gets wrapped up in like local politics and conspiracy, and it's basically just like an homage to Chinatown, like directly homaging Chinatown. Like he watches Chinatown in the beginning of the movie, and then like you see that like the rest of the movie basically takes on like an aesthetic that is very similar to Chinatown, a whole like vibe, a mystery, and like it can be fun. Like I think it looks excellent, like really great cinematography. I think that it is very well cast. Like it has some interesting people like Annette Bening, Danny DeVito, Jennifer Jason Leigh, like really strong cast. Stephen Dablowski is also excellent in it, but it is wacky. I think too wacky. I think they throw a lot at the wall to see what sticks. And yeah, I found it to be real, like, trudge to get through. I was like really glad when it was over. So yeah, I think you're not missing much.
What inspired you to watch this?
We watched it on Spoiler Piece. We'll watch older films for our Patreon segment, and Dave wanted to see it because he likes Chris Pine quite a bit. And when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, it has a really good cast. I wonder if this is any good. I'd heard that it wasn't very good. I'm like, I'll give it a shot. And yeah, there's a reason it's not good.
Yeah, it's not to be confused with that Channing Tatum movie, right? Because like I feel like that
Roofman.
Yeah, I feel like they're very close in name.
Yeah, got 3 books at the top of my list right now. The first one is called The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinneman. It's the 5th installment of his Dungeon Crawler Carl series, which if you haven't heard of it, you basically sound like a hyper toddler trying to describe his favorite thing. It's basically the Earth is destroyed, turned into these giant levels by this alien civilization that forces all the remaining humans who survived to compete in this, galaxy-wide reality TV show. And the main character is a Coast Guard veteran who, with his ex-girlfriend Showcat, who can shoot lasers out of her eyes. Yeah, it just gets more and more ridiculous as time goes on. They're fairly light books, but then they also have this real heart to them. They're it's a genre called lit RPG, so it's sort of, there's a lot of like stats and things like that. And I didn't expect to really enjoy it, but I'm now in book 5. The audiobooks are quite good, and I've been sort of burning through those that way in between other books. The other book I'm reading is Sublimation by Isabel Kim. The premise of that one is that if you cross a border instance, which means that you leave part of you basically split into 2 people, one person who goes ahead and one person who stays behind. And it's about a woman who comes back home from the United States to her home country of Korea after her grandfather dies, and the incidents that stayed behind has some sort of plots. There's a lot of lingering resentment, and yeah, it's kind of hard to explain without sort of giving anything away. So I'll just leave it at that. And then the other book I would read is actually one that we published at where I work for my day job. And it's called When the Trees Came Back by Robert Mello. And it's a history of how Vermont was deforested in the 1800s and is through citizen action and environmentalists and, politicians, how everybody sort of worked to bring the forest back. We were 75% deforested at one point, and now it's about 75% reforested. So it's a longer history of that.
Impressive.
Awesome.
I know there's tons of other books, but those are the top three.
Yeah, we talked about the TV series plans for Dungeon Crawler Carl a few weeks ago here, and since I've finished the first book and started the second one, actually on my drive last night to see Disclosure Day.
I'll be really interested to see how they do that as a TV show. I can't really imagine it as. I think it would be more effective as an animated show, just because you could then just go completely over the top with everything. Yeah. But that's just me. I will demand that Alan Tudyk play a bunch of roles as a voice actor. That's my only request.
I saw a Sublimation. Like I don't subscribe to like the Aardvark book club, but they're like this like one of those subscription book clubs that like you pick like 6 titles from every month, or like 3 titles out of their 6 books. And like Sublimation was like on their list, and I was like, oh, this does look really interesting. So
I think that's going to be a big book this year. I think we'll see it pop back up when the award, sort of the annual awards circuit comes up in 2027. I think it'll be a big one.
Very cool. Very quickly, I caught up with a movie that I had bought. Did I buy it? Maybe I got it for a gift around Christmas time, which it's part of the Hong Kong Classics collection that Shout had acquired from, I guess, Golden Harvest. And it was a collection of many films, including stuff like Hard Boiled and many other films. So it was with stars like Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung and what have you. And The Killer was kind of like John Woo doing Melville's Les Samurai, which is like this classic French film of Ray Long. I think I'll mess up his name anyways, but Les Samurai. And the idea is this assassin, he's doing a job, and during that job he accidentally blinds a singer in the firefight, and he's very guilty about it, and he's like, I'm gonna do everything I can to repair your eyesight, and maybe I'll just do one more job to get the money to do that. Meanwhile, there's this detective that's on his trail who will stop at nothing to find out who this perpetrator is. That they're the kind of cross intersection with each other and have to fight together to fight a big crime boss. And similar, if you've seen Hard Boiled or any of those mid 80s to early 90s John Woo movies, this one's bullets a-blazing, lots of great kung fu action and gung fu, if you will.
I love me some gun fu.
Yeah, it's like I love like when they like jump backwards and fire at the same time, and they're dodging bullets. Like it makes no sense, but it works. This one also has like a famous sequence at the end of it, which takes place in a church. I say famous because one of my favorite all-time episodes of anime is episode 5 of the famous series Cowboy Bebop, and that episode in of itself is a homage to The Killer. It takes place in a church with the lead characters, Spike and Vicious, going toe to toe, and it was great seeing that come to fruition in front of my eyes. I didn't have a way to place it before, but now I do. And Killer, it lives up to its reputation. It's a pretty good John Woo movie, and if you haven't picked it up yet and you like these Hong Kong cinema classics, I recommend it.
Sounds fun.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up now. We're a little long, but we had a great conversation on Steven Spielberg and a great guest of Andrew Liptak. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode, Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks, I really appreciated the invite.
We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time, even further into the summer season, Evan. We'll see what that brings us box office wise, and topic wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you later.
Bye.